What's up, guys? Welcome to another daily Bible reading snapshot. Today we're only reading one chapter in the Old Testament, but you might find it interesting. Maybe you thought quarantining was invented in 2020. Well, this chapter is going to tell you it was invented long before 2020. So this chapter is all about leprosy and the laws surrounding leprosy. And leprosy in the Bible is a skin disease. And maybe you've never even heard of leprosy, or maybe you don't even know anybody who has leprosy, and that's probably a good thing. But leprosy seemed to be this crazy disease that would take over your skin, and it would turn your skin into these like little sore white patches, and then it would take over your whole body, and you'd be so infectious that if anybody got around you, they would get this skin disease on them, and it would eat away your body. There are some people today that have that same form of leprosy, but it's pretty rare these days. But this disease was really bad, and God wanted to give this nation, remember, who are we talking to in the book of Leviticus? We're talking to a nation among nations. We're talking to a group of people among plenty of groups of people. And God says, I have some instructions for you to keep, even when it comes to your sanitation and when it comes to these leprosy laws. Because if you had this skin disease, you were considered unclean, and God didn't want that person associating with all the rest of the people because they were going to get everybody sick. So there's not a correlation between COVID and leprosy or anything like that. It's not the same thing at all. But there was this distinction that was supposed to be made between the healthy and the sick in this community because God didn't want it spreading everywhere. So it's interesting. He gives these commands about inspecting the leprosy and things like this. Is it spreading over time? Things like, are there new spots that are being created? Is it growing underneath the skin? Has it affected the hair growth? Is it itchy? It almost sounds like these priests become like doctors and they're inspecting the health of these people. And God gives instructions here. And the thing I just want you to think about is how amazing is this? That years and years and centuries before germ theory or anything that was related to germ theory really developed, God was giving them instructions about germs and the spread of disease. I just think it's so amazing that when people talk about how the Bible's just this old book and God, he's just some made up character and he doesn't know anything. God knew a lot more about this than they did at this point, and he's giving them some helpful instructions about how to keep this disease away from the whole community. So that's interesting. Leviticus 13 is an interesting chapter. I've said interesting so many times. I don't want to keep saying interesting, but it just reminds me of 2020 so much. So anyway, all right, let's look at the New Testament. We're looking again at Matthew chapter 26. Now we're at the upper room, and Jesus is talking to the disciples here at the upper room, and they've already had a little bit of a discussion about how someone was going to betray Jesus, and now Judas is exposed as a betrayer. And Judas leaves that area, and Jesus continues to talk to these disciples, and then he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. And we see the interesting prayer of Jesus here where Jesus was sorrowful, and he said, I'm sorrowful even to death. And he asked the disciples, can you stay here with me and pray? And Jesus goes a little bit further into this garden. He's praying to God, and it says that he was doing that for about an hour because Jesus comes back and he finds them sleeping. And Jesus says, couldn't you even just stay awake for 1 hour and talk to God? I'm going through some seriously hard stuff right now. And Jesus says, can you not please just pray for me for 1 hour? And he goes back and he prays again. And he comes back and they're asleep again. And they're not getting the point that they're supposed to stay awake and be praying for Jesus through this hard time. But I guess we could sympathize with them because what Jesus says next in verse 41, after rebuking them for not being able to stay awake for an hour to pray, he says, watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation, for the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. When it comes to temptation, that might be how we feel sometimes. Like we want to do the right thing, but our flesh is weak. When it comes down to it, if we're not constantly praying and asking God for strength, we will fall into temptation. If we're not constantly asking him for strength, we're going to fall into our own temptations that are, the book of James says, that we kind of create ourselves by searching after them and seeking after them and then falling into and choosing to do those sinful things, and then it becomes bad habits. And James says, look, you got to stop that at the root. And Jesus says here, you got to stop that before it starts by praying. So let that be one big application from this section. We want to be watching and praying that we might not enter into temptation because we know something. We know that our spirit might be willing to avoid sin, but our flesh is weak. And right after this, Jesus is betrayed, and we're going to see how that story unfolds tomorrow. So we'll see you back here tomorrow for another daily Bible reading snapshot.